What's going on, everybody? Pastor Christian here, and I wanted to welcome you all to Crosswinds Church Online. If you didn't know already, I serve here as the student ministries pastor, which means each and every single week I get to spend time with the students here at Crosswinds and get to see how God has really been working in their lives. Just last week, I got to sit here on this very stage and see many of the students on their knees before God. And I got to tell you, as a youth pastor today, it's an encouraging sight to see. But today, I have been given the honor and the privilege to get to share with you guys a message that I feel like God has given me specifically for this time and this season that we're in as believers. So, what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is about how we as believers can be better at understanding each other. And understanding each other is hard. Understanding things in general is hard. I can think back to a time myself when I was younger and my mom, I had 3 other brothers and sisters. And so my mom was like, all right, you're going to make a meal for yourself. And the first thing I did was make some cup noodles. And I had never made cup noodles before. But for those of you guys who know, back then we used to be able to make them in the microwave. And so I took this cup of noodles, and you guys know the instructions. You throw some water up to the fill line, put it in the microwave, heat it up for a few minutes, and you're good to go. So that's what I did. I read these instructions. I understood the instructions. I was like, all right, this is exactly what I have to do. So I took the cup, I pulled off the packaging, threw it in the microwave, pressed start. Now, for those of you guys who are actually paying attention, you see I missed a step there when it came to putting the water in. And what I ended up doing was setting our entire kitchen on fire, simply because I didn't understand the directions that I had to add water to this. And our whole house was smoking. It was crazy. We had to call the fire department simply because I didn't understand these directions. And this is a silly example of not understanding, but we've all been there before, whether it's something silly like that or not understanding other people. And that's what I want to talk about today, how we as believers can better understand each other. And I believe that starts with us seeking understanding first. I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase before, seek understanding before you try to be understood, or in other ways. And it's very true. And today I want to dive into why that makes so much sense and why us as believers should adopt that mentality and what the Bible really says about that. Because the truth is, we all have opinions. My mom used to put it like this, in much more colorful words, of course, but she would say opinions are like butts. We all have them, and they all stink. And yes, much more colorful words. And she's from Texas. You can forgive her. But my mom would say this, and it was such a harsh statement at that time, but I've learned so much from it over the years. The truth is, we all have opinions. And today, when we look at how impactful our opinions are, they're everywhere. Businesses rise and fall over a bad opinion. People are willing to sacrifice relationships with their friends, with family members, over an opinion that didn't get validated. Our opinions mean so much to us nowadays. But if we didn't know this, we know it now that our opinions are colored by our own understanding of the world. And what I mean by that is our opinions are based off of what we have experienced and what we know. And honestly, it's easier for us as believers, or even as just humans, to stay stuck in our echo chambers and stay stuck with people who think like us, act like us, talk like us, and say the same things as we do. Because it's easier. There's no argument there. There's no fighting. There's no infighting. It's much easier to do that. But I believe that God is calling us to a place of understanding with each other. And that only happens by us choosing to understand first. I had a friend growing up. His name was Taylor. And this is how God had been working on me from a very young age of how to understand people better. But this friend of mine, Taylor, we grew up right next to each other. His house was right behind my house. Our backyards connected. And Taylor helped me understand people in a way I had never understood before. You see, I was born in San Angelo, Texas, and yet raised in Southern California. So already, that's something I don't understand. I come from the country to hippies, and I'm like, what's happening here? And so I had to learn how to understand there. And then not only that, our family was one of the only black families in this white suburban neighborhood that we lived in. We loved it there. And I met this guy named Taylor, who I consider my brother today. I've been with him through life's trials and tragedies. I helped bury his brother and bury his mother and got to sit with him and pray with him through that. He's my brother. But what he taught me at that time was how to understand people who didn't look like me, who didn't think like me, who didn't act like me, or talk like me. The things that he introduced me to at that point, I didn't understand. I could not understand what Van Halen was. I could not understand what the purpose of this show Friends was. I couldn't get it. I was like, I want to be their friend, but what's the whole purpose of this show? I couldn't get it. I didn't understand how he danced and the difference in our dancing styles. And I sure didn't understand the lack of seasoning in food. I didn't get it. But these things I learned over time. These were just minor things. And I began, as I created a relationship with Taylor, as he and I became best friends and then became brothers, I started to learn and not just understand these things about a culture I didn't know, but learn to love these things about a culture I didn't know. I started loving Van Halen and Friends and Coldplay, even green bean casserole. I had never tasted that before. It was great, though. I started loving these things that I had never experienced this before. And my point is this, in a silly way, is that I learned then that my opinions about why others do what they do mean absolutely nothing. My opinions had been wrong and based off of inaccuracies. And I chose then to begin to listen to others first, seeking an understanding with others above all else. I love what the Bible tells us about this exact thought process in Proverbs 18:2. It tells us that a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinions. The thing is, we all have opinions, and your opinions are valid. I'm not saying that they're not, but I encourage you today and every other day to begin to choose to understand others before submitting your opinion to them, and watch how it changes your conversations. Watch how it brings peace and understanding. The word tells us right here, it hits the nail on the head. It's so easy to just post or speak our opinions. When we look at social media nowadays, that's just how it is. People throw up an opinion on there and they're like, this is how I feel. You're not going to change my mind. And if you disagree with me, I am in this conversation. And we'll delete each other. We won't have relationships with people that God wants us to have relationships with. The Bible is clearly warning against this type of behavior. And in Proverbs, it tells us a fool takes no pleasure in understanding. So I don't want to be the fool here in this verse. Instead, I want to choose to understand others. And it's going to be hard. It's not going to be all roses and flowers. People are going to get on your nerves because that's what people do. But it's not about that. It's about us choosing to understand. We have a call, a great commission to make disciples of all nations. But we can't do that if we are not choosing to understand others. The second part comes with us seeking to be understood. See, this is the good part. Most of us actually, we start with this instead of the first part. We start with, here's my opinion. This is what I believe. And we start there and we forget this first part of choosing to understand. And I don't really blame anyone for this. I've been guilty of this myself. We live in a world and a society today that is all about meeting each other and trying to overdo each other, outdo each other, making sure that we are the only ones seen, etc. That's just the culture we live in, and it is literally a rat race to be heard. I get it. But if we choose to understand first, then when we express our opinions about how we feel, we can then bring a peace and a love and an understanding to others. This reminds me of a movie. It's a kid's movie, and I'm kind of a nerd, so bear with me right quick. But it's a kid's movie called How to Train Your Dragon. And I don't know if you've seen this movie before, but in it, there's a conflict going on. There's dragons versus the humans, and they've been fighting for centuries. They've been fighting for so long, nobody really knew the reason. And we as the watcher, we ended up finding exactly why that they were fighting for all of these years through the story of the son of the chief of the humans. His name was Hiccup. And Hiccup met a dragon. It's a funny name. But Hiccup met a dragon named Toothless, and he sees this dragon, and instead of killing him like humans had been taught to do, he chooses to understand Toothless, understand what makes Toothless. He chooses to understand what's going on, and in that, he finds the depth of who these dragons were. He finds out that the dragons had been enslaved for years and years to fight against the humans. And they were doing this not by their own choice. They were being forced to fight the humans, and they wanted their freedom. But for years and years, the humans and the dragons were at war. And what we can see from this story is simple. It's a simple plot, and it's a simple lesson that we can learn, is that judging is easy, but understanding is difficult. And see, that's the reason that most of us are quick to judge. But I encourage you today, if we, before we leap to judgment, if we try to understand others' perspective, we would change things. I mean, you never know what people are going through. You never know what's happening behind the eyes of someone who's in your face. And what we learn from this story and How to Train Your Dragon is that the humans had their fixed notions, their fixed prejudices of these dragons, and they could only see them from an evil perspective. But Hiccup tried to understand, and he chose to understand these dragons from their perspective. And when he did that, then they were able to effectively unite both the dragons and the humans and bring peace to their entire world. The message we see here is this: if we choose to understand first, we then have a context so that when we share our understanding with others, it's then presented in a way that bridges the gap between us and brings peace and understanding to everyone around us. The word, it actually tells us this in Psalm 119, 130. It says, the unfolding of your words gives light. It imparts understanding to the simple. And what we can get from this verse is that our words have such power to them. Our words are a powerful tool that can bring understanding to all, even the simple. But we have to use the tool wisely. We have to choose to understand who we're even talking to before imparting that wisdom, or our words are just going to end up falling on deaf ears. I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, but people don't care what you know until they know that you care. When we choose to understand others this shows that we care first. And lastly, we need to choose to understand even in our offense. Look, it's so easy today to get offended by just about anything. I mean, everywhere we look, there is something that will make you mad. I see stuff all the time. I'm like, this is horrible. It offends my soul. But this is going to happen. There's no blame game, because I've been guilty of this myself. This is going to happen. People are going to say, they're going to do things, and they will do things that make you superheated, that make you offended, that make you feel a certain way that you don't like. But here's the thing. We can choose what to do with our offense. I heard a phrase recently, is that if you get offended over the small things, you'll never be able to handle the big things. And see, that phrase is so true today, because we don't have to get angry as soon as we are offended. You see, the big things that God has promised us is that if we're faithful to Him, we have a calling, a promise, a commission, a great commission to make disciples of all nations. We can't do that with the spirit of offense, with the anger from our offense rising over us. We have to choose what we do in our offense. We have to choose to understand even though we are offended, if we want to fulfill that great commission. Proverbs 14:29 says this: whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. You see, the Bible tells us right here, hasty tempers means that we failed understanding others. I encourage you, if you're offended right now, if you've been in situations where you're offended, start over from the top of this. Start over and choose to understand someone first, and then share your opinion and see if that offense is still there. Because we can't control what others say, what others do, and how others are going to be, but we can control our reactions to them, and we can choose to understand even when we are offended. So in closing, I want to leave you guys with these few points. I want to go back over it one more time. Start from the top. As believers, all of us should choose to understand others first. It's hard. It takes a lot out of each and every one of us. We have to choose to step back out of ourselves, forget our opinion for a second, and choose to be listeners, choose to understand. And then from there, we can share our opinion. Because then we've built a bridge of understanding. We've built a way for us to actually talk to someone and get through. So many people today are needing Jesus. They are needing the understanding that us as believers in Christ have. But we need to understand where they're coming from, or else our words are falling on deaf ears. And lastly, if we choose to understand even when we're offended, we know today there are so many ways for us to be offended. But if we choose to have an attitude, a heart of understanding, even in our offense, we'll bring peace and love and understanding to all the communities that we're in. You have a purpose and a call. We all have that great commission which tells us to make disciples. So, I encourage you all today to choose to understand. And so for some of you guys, as you've been watching this, maybe you were offended by what I said. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you've been offended this week. Maybe God's just working on your heart. And maybe you're in a place right now where you don't know if you die tonight, if you're going to heaven tomorrow. Right now, I want to give you guys that opportunity. Everyone, man, woman, child, if you're watching this, today's the time to take that opportunity to give your life to Christ. If God has been calling you, if God has been opening His arms out to you, what is the delay? Make that decision now to give your hearts to Christ. And we're going to pray this prayer. And so from behind your screen, you can just close your eyes. You can stand up. You can take a knee. You can do whatever God is leading you to do right now. But repeat this prayer with me. Dear Jesus, I confess I'm a sinner. I ask you to come into my heart and forgive me for my sins. I believe that you died for me. And I believe that you rose again. And with your help, from this day forward, I will live for you. In Jesus' mighty name. If you just accepted Christ today for the first time, then I encourage you, there's a link in the messages below, in the chat box for this video, and you can click on that link, or you can click on the link on the video itself. Find a way to contact us, and we can help provide you with the resources you can need. We can connect you to a life group to where you can have Christian family day in and day out. And so here at Crosswinds, we're good givers. We love to give. It's part of the mantra of this church, to give to others. And that only happens because of how faithful you are as a giver, because of your sacrifice, because of your dedication to giving and to spreading the word of Christ and the love of Christ to others. And so right now, we have a few things that'll pop up, a bunch of different ways to give. You'll see them here and here. And if you're texting in right now, you can text in to 84321 at any time and send your tithes through that. Lastly, as a church, we like to live by this declaration of faith that we declare over our lives every single service, not as a throwaway thing, but because we believe it to be true. So here we go. I am blessed. I have divine favor. I am not alone. I am a child of God. I am more than a conqueror. I put my trust in the Lord, and I walk in the promises of God's holy word because God has a miracle for me. Be blessed this week. See you guys.